Hello, I'm Anika from Made to Sew. In this video, we're going to be looking at how to sew the shoulders and the neckline of my newly launched Aria pattern. Aria is a cowl neck dress or top. It comes with two different sleeve length options, or you can make it sleeveless. In this video, we're going to be solely focusing on sewing the shoulders and neckline. But over the coming weeks, I will launch some more videos in relation to this pattern, such as how to make the garment in jersey. Sadly, you will need to have the instruction booklet and pattern in order to follow along with this tutorial.
Start by cutting out your fabric. Cut one front on the fold and two back pattern pieces. These are currently placed with the right sides together. Mark notches and other details on your pattern. That includes your dart and the stitching line for the shoulder. The shoulder area is this V shape that connects into the horizontal fold line on the pattern. It's important to mark the stitching line of the shoulder on the front and the back pattern pieces for accuracy. Mark the stitching line using your preferred method: carbon paper and a tracing wheel, chalk, or a removable pen. If you're working with chalk or a removable pen, use a ruler, measure in the seam allowance 1 centimetre 3/8 of an inch, and draw a line on either side of the shoulder. Extend these lines to connect into a point. The shoulder looks slightly different between the sleeveless and with sleeves version. These two pattern pieces are the sleeveless version. There is more fabric above the horizontal fold line. To give you a brief understanding of how the pattern works, the fold line is the neckline on both the front and the back. And the fabric is actually going to fold along that line, so that with the sleeveless version, the fabric is finishing the armhole. For the with sleeves version, the fabric does not finish the armhole. This is a sample of the back of the with sleeves version, and you'll see that the line for the shoulder is a little bit shorter on the facing side because the facing does not finish at the end of the armhole like it does with the sleeveless version. The fold line here would allow for the facing to sit like so. This means that the facing does not disturb the sleeve join. Once the shoulder has been clearly marked, we're going to apply some fusible interfacing to the point of the stitching line at the shoulder. That's because we're going to be cutting in nice and close to this point, so we want to stabilize it and give it a bit of longevity. Cut a piece of lightweight interfacing that measures approximately 1.5 centimeters by 1.5 centimeters, half an inch by half an inch. You're welcome to cut this from some interfacing that you already have, and I would recommend something like this lightweight product I have here. This comes in a variety of colours and is available to purchase from my website. Alternatively, you could use an interfacing product that is already cut into strips. Whatever product you're using, cut a square or circle. Position the interfacing so that it sits directly over the point of the stitching line for the shoulder, which is why I recommend using a lightweight product. Using your iron, fuse the interfacing into position. If you can't see your stitching line at the shoulders through your interfacing, redraw it so it's nice and clear. The next step would be to sew the darts on the front of your garment, and I'll leave you to do that. Place the front of the pattern with the right side facing up. Take one of the back pieces and place it with the right side facing down so that the right sides are together. Position the shoulders in the correct area with, of course, the facing at the top of the garment, the hem at the bottom. You will notice that there is a difference between the shoulder size. The front is wider than the back, and that's correct. Begin by pinning the point of the stitching line together. Take your pin and place it through one piece of fabric, right at the point of the stitching line. You will then position the pin through the second piece of fabric, making sure that the pin finishes on the point, and if it doesn't, reposition it. We're going to begin by matching up one side. So from the edge, from the armhole edge to the point is what we want to pin in place. And you want to be checking that the pin is going in on the stitching line that you've drawn on both sides. The shoulders should be the same length and should finish at the same point at the armhole. And this technique here is called pin basting, where the pin is going in on the stitching line on both sides of the fabric. For a lightweight flexible fabric like this crepe, or perhaps a jersey, you might find that you can actually force the join of the shoulders. So you could pin the whole section and sew the whole way around. In a stable woven fabric, it is unlikely that you will be able to do this without cutting in close to the stitching line. Therefore, we're going to head to the machine next. If you're working with the with sleeves pattern, the pinning and the sewing is exactly the same process. The shape just looks a little bit different because the facing side is shorter. If you are an experienced sewer, I recommend that you complete the method that I use. Stitch down one side of the shoulder, position the needle down exactly at the point, cut into the fabric as close to the point as you can, pivot the fabric to pin the second side, and sew to the edge. It can be a good idea to reduce your stitch length as you sew the point. I would use a 1.5mm stitch length and change your stitch length 1 centimetre or 3/8 before and after the point. For a beginner, let's try something a little easier. We're going to sew one side of this section first, sewing from the edge of the fabric with a back stitch along until we get to the point. Just before the point, about 1 centimetre or 3/8 away, we're going to reduce our stitch length from a standard 2.5mm to a smaller 1.5mm. This is to help reinforce that area. Once the needle is in the point, you can complete a very small back stitch. Go backwards once or twice and then forwards again once or twice. Remove the work from the machine and trim the threads. Now you have the ability to cut into the V on both sides of the fabric separately so that you can make sure you're being accurate. You want to cut as close to the point as possible, but not through it. If you don't cut close enough, you will get a little lump in this area when the garment is finished. Once you've made the cut on both sides of the fabric, you will be able to pivot the fabric so that the stitching lines meet from the point to the second edge. Heading back to the sewing machine, we're going to start 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch before the point, sewing over ourselves. Backstitch, get to the point, position the needle into the fabric, lift the presser foot, turn the work so that you can sew along the second side. Keep the stitch length small, 1.5mm in stitch length, until you're about 1 centimetre or 3/8 away from the point. Then you can turn it back to the standard 2.5mm. Backstitch when you get to the end. Press open the seam allowances on both sides for a nice finish. If you're working on the with sleeves option, I recommend that you finish the raw edges of the fabric here to prevent fraying. I'm using my overlocker or serger. Separate the seam allowances so that you're only working with one at a time. Carefully feed them through the machine. You will complete this for the 4 seam allowances, 2 for either side of the V shape. For the sleeveless version, you do not need to worry about finishing the edges of the fabric because this will be hidden inside the armhole. The next step for the sleeveless version is to fold the armhole so that you have got the right sides of the fabric together for the front and the back. You're going to be sewing around the armhole shape. You will then clip into the curves, trim the seam allowances if required, and pull the back through the shoulder to the front of the garment. Continue sewing the garment, sew the side seams, the centre back seam, and understitch the armhole. If you're working with the with sleeves version, you will of course insert the sleeves. Follow the instruction booklet for a complete step-by-step guide. Hopefully this video has helped you learn how to sew nice accurate shoulders on the Made to Sew Aria pattern. If you make this pattern, please do share a photo, I would love to see it. And as always, thanks for watching and subscribe for more sewing tips.